Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Jillian Lama. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Hi, Alicia. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes, so I am the founder of Body You Crave and the Body You Crave podcast. I help women lose weight eating the foods they love. No pills, potions, supplements, cheating, willpower required. So it's all about how do we make weight loss easy? How do we make it simple? How do we make it fun and effective? How do we make it sustainable, right? So it's a lot of things that we often don't associate with, with weight loss or getting healthy and actually enjoying the body that we're in. And so as a mom of a 10-month-old, I definitely can resonate and relate to a lot of women out there who feel like we are doing so much imperfectly, and there can be a lot of shame around it. And we often have a lot of ideas around how do we exercise just the right way or eat in the perfect way so that we can lose this weight and then we can feel happy or feel proud or confident or whatever it is that we're truly striving for. And so really just being able to let go of that perfection and that drive to be perfect and recognize that we don't actually have to be perfect in order to get the results and create the life that we truly want. So I think there's a big myth, and that I love your show and just what you stand for and really spreading this message.
Yeah. That was a huge part of my story, was this image of perfection, so much so that when my background doesn't look nice and I didn't have time to clean the background, instead of dealing with the background, I blurred the background.
Right.
There's still those little things, and I've talked about in the past where it's like, oh yeah, my background looks really nice. The rest of the house is a disaster, but the background looks really nice. So I've been transparent that I'm not this person that has the perfect house. But I don't also want you to see it either. So.
Right.
But we're in the middle of, I guess we're in the last day of my son's school class. Not the school, but the class shut down because of COVID. And so 3 people tested positive. And so they just closed the classroom for the 10 days to get everybody over it, which, I appreciated, because after the first time I was like, first one tested positive, I was like,
right.
what are you doing about this? And it was okay because he wasn't there that day and he wasn't exposed. So I was like, okay, I'm not worried. But then he got exposed twice. And I'm like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
Anyway, point of the topic. Oh, here he is.
Comforts and snuggles.
All right. We're not going to have squeaky toys on the podcast today, though. So one of the things we talked about in our pre-call call was, and I think you mentioned it earlier, the restriction, right? So or cutting something out altogether. So I don't think I've mentioned this story on the podcast yet, that I cut out creamer in coffee altogether because we didn't call it creamer, we called it chemical creamer. And I think you asked if there was another option, like a creamer that was not chemical creamer.
A non-chemically creamer.
And I was just, I mean, quite honestly, I was too lazy to go find it. And
Yeah.
um, so I kind of liked the, um, I don't know what the word is, but I liked the fact it was poetic to me that I stopped drinking coffee or I started drinking black coffee and stopped drinking creamer on my dad's birthday, like 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And and the thing that kind of got me there was I was so mad
Mm-hmm.
that he wouldn't quit drinking coffee with creamer when he knows how bad it is for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was unwilling to do the same. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
been, close to or
Mm-hmm.
a little over 3 years drinking black coffee. But talk about this this idea that we have to be so restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where does this come from that we think that, where's the myth come from? Or
Yeah, so there's a couple of pieces at play. It's so interesting to see our thoughts about food and diet, about body. So many of these are like little puzzle pieces, and we don't realize that we've fit all of these puzzle pieces together to form the view and the picture that we have today. And so one of the pieces is all or nothing thinking. Well, it's I either go big or I go home. If I have a little bit, it means I've ruined it. I ruined the diet. Screw it. I'll try again tomorrow. And it also stems from perfection, from I have to be perfect. I have to be perfect with my diet. I have to eat the right things. I have to avoid those bad foods. And so it's whenever now I'm not perfect, well, right now I screwed up. Okay, well, throw out the towel. Like just everything's shot. And so it's all of these multiple different pieces around our thoughts around food, around good and bad food. So we moralize food, and then we moralize ourselves when we eat it. So how many times have you ever thought, like, I was so bad last night, I had a bowl of ice cream and then a brownie, or where we might be like, I was so good, I said no to the bread basket, right? And we do this, and I caught myself doing this too, even just, it was a couple years ago, even starting to kind of teach this, noticing how that like got into my brain of like, I was so good today, I only had 2 pieces of chocolate. And it's like, no, 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 no. I can still praise myself for making progress and making like good choices, but I am not good or bad based off of what I eat. And so we have to really, what I call is, we've got to end the war with food. We have to change the way that we see food, the way we interact with it, because when we take these labels of good and bad off, often we stop restricting, and we stop binging, we stop overeating and over consuming, because we are removing some of that restriction. And so when I can have a brownie today and tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that and the day after that, like in perpetuity, when it's always okay to have a brownie, I'm not binging on the entire pan in one night because I've had a stressful day, and well, now I've done ruined my diet now, and screw it, all the pan's almost gone. No sense in putting these last 2 ones away. Might as well just eat it, right? We have a lot of thoughts and excuses and justifications that keep us eating. And we just have to start to work through that and start to see what are my thoughts around food? What are my thoughts around what can I eat or what can't I eat and still be able to lose weight? I think we all have this view of like, well, I can't drink wine and lose weight. I can't eat carbs and lose weight. I can't do this or I can't do that. So we just have to be mindful of where other people have come in and told us with some kind of like diet or program, like processed foods are evil, you've got to stay away from them. And also recognize that we are going to be able to stick with programs when we are the ones consciously making that decision. So for like you and the coffee, you can actually say no to coffee comfortably and feel like good about it because you decided when you were ready, this is what I'm doing. Not somebody else on the outside telling you, you really shouldn't be drinking that creamer. Well, don't you think you could just drink black coffee, right? Like, I want to be like, no, bitch, I can't. Like it's okay to have those moments and just recognize that we need to take it in stride, whether it looks like cutting things out altogether for a time. Maybe you want to cut certain things out forever, and that's okay too. We just want to look at our reasoning for it. Do we like the reasons? And then also looking at, do we want to cut back in moderation, which is how I went to black coffee first thing in the morning. I still will do a mocha or something in the afternoon sometimes, but I drink black coffee, and it started with kind of a slow shift and just tapering back on what I added to it. So, giving yourself yourself that grace and permission to find your own way is really important.
Now, I need to set the record straight that I have never eaten an entire pan of brownies all by myself. Like, that's never happened. Getting that, like, that's happened more times than I want to admit, but
Right.
no,
Yeah.
I like brownie. I remember the first time that I really started thinking about why I was eating food.
Mm-hmm.
And making brownies for people, specifically, I freaking love making brownies. That's my favorite thing to do, or it was for a long time. That like that it was like, this is how I show my love to people. Like, it was my love
Right.
language to make these brownies, because
Yeah.
and I think it was because my dad liked them so much, and I would always put like half of with nuts. I hate nuts in brownies so much, but my dad loved them, and so I would do half and half with and without. And there was just this like connection between the brownies and love. And it was like, oh, that's super interesting. And I this concept of emotional eating has been a journey for me, and one that I've pretended didn't exist even after I knew it did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think for so many of us, we don't know how to handle it, or we just think, well, when I changed my job and my job stopped stressing me out, well, then things will get better. Then I'll stop eating. Well, once things get better in my marriage, once these kids grow out of a certain phase, once this thing changes, once this happens, well, then the emotional eating, well, then that should just kind of resolve itself. I think we don't have, like, it's not talked about as much as it probably should be, because we emotionally eat, on a very regular basis. I think it's like 95% of the country will emotionally eat at least once throughout that week. Like, that's a big chunk. I mean, we don't even realize it though. And it might look like, you finally get some alone time. And so you're scrolling through Instagram or Facebook and you're, finding your favorite chocolate because it makes you happy or it helps you relax. It's drinking a glass of wine at the end of the night because that's how you unwind. It's maybe going through the drive-through at McDonald's and grabbing a snack because this is the way that you can keep your kids from killing each other in the moment. Like, there's all kinds of reasons why we can turn to food. And so not moralizing any of that either, but just starting to look for those patterns and to recognize that, oh, like my brain has just decided that food was an easy way to change my emotional state. It was just really effective, really easy. And with the plethora of foods that we have available now, the gas stations, the grocery stores, the Targets, it's like you can stop anywhere and grab anything. And it's like, oh, and this will make me feel better, or this will make this task better or easier or more fun. And I have to watch myself with that too, of like, there are certain tasks where I'm like, oh, how do I make this more fun? I have some chocolate, right? It's like, that's where my brain wants to go. And it's okay. We just want to start to look for those patterns and start to recognize and work backwards and start to be able to assess and evaluate instead of just shaming and like beating ourselves up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was so I go into the office on one day a week, and I pick Monday to get it out of the way.
Yeah.
And so Sunday night I was like, I think I might get a Starbucks tomorrow because I'm going into the office. So it'll even the idea of having the Starbucks because I didn't want to be at the office.
Right. There's like some dread there. Yeah.
That's a new thought. But when I got into the office, so that morning I woke up and I stepped in the dog's poop because like it was within, I don't know, the first 3 minutes of being awake, and I'm washing poop off of my foot, and I'm just and all the grumbling thoughts that come along.
Yeah.
And then I got an email that was vague, and my mind goes super creative with vague emails. And then the word in the email was my required schedule, and I read required, and my brain translated to mandatory, and those are both trigger words for me. And anyway, long story short, like there was all of this negative input, and I'm like, I'm not getting the Starbucks because I am detaching Starbucks as this thing that's altering my mood. Right. And so I did not get Starbucks on Monday. And then I think you and I talked about the Noom app that I've been using for my weight loss journey, which I'm down 10 pounds now.
Yay, way to go.
I got over the hump. I was stuck in between the 6 and 7 pounds for like over a month. And it was really frustrating. And that's another part of the emotional like attachment to results that I've been working on. But I finally got over that hump and just detached from the results. They're still exciting, but I'm detached from them. But the Noom app said you can treat yourself tomorrow, right? So that was on Tuesday, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to town. Not that I don't have a Starbucks 5 minutes from me, but I'm also going to town, which is 25 minutes from me. And that's a good time to do it, to have that reward, because it's not to alter my mood. It's like I've been given this permission to reward myself. I have mixed feelings about the food being reward.
Right, which I was going to say, we need to be careful with using food as reward too. Of it shouldn't, like, one, we need to find ways to celebrate ourselves and find ways to reward ourselves throughout the weeks, throughout the months, and reward ourselves for the action that we're taking, not just the results that we're getting. And that's something that I find is like something that I'm working on as well, is like, how do I cheer on myself and reward myself and praise myself for the action and not just this end result that I'm creating, and trusting that I'm in the process of creating it. So that is one aspect. And then the other piece is, really starting to see that praise and talk is a reward, and it should be a reward that we're giving ourselves every day, and really being mindful of the negative self-talk that often is ultimately what leads towards us rummaging through the pantry or reaching for the ice cream or, using food to self-soothe. A lot of times it's to get away from our own negativity, our own thoughts about ourselves. So really just being aware and mindful, and you get to decide when you want to reward yourself. That's the other thing too, is you don't have to wait for the app to tell you that you get to. But looking at how can you reward yourself? I've got one client and she likes to reward herself with facials. So it's like every 5 pounds she gets a facial. For some, it might be more like a massage, or buying new workout clothes, or getting like a new handbag or something like that. If it's more of like kind of a milestone. I had one client who she was in the process of losing 100 pounds. And she was like, when I hit the 100-pound mark, I'm going to buy myself a nice diamond ring. She had never been married before. This was something that meant a lot to her. It was a good goal for her to have, something that she was going to be working towards. And then she also had smaller incremental rewards on the way. That way we make the journey and the process fun, because that's often why we go back to why we can restrict for a while and then we fall out of it, we fall off the wagon, we gain the weight back, is because it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't enjoyable of a process. And so that's something I'm learning. How do I do this in other areas of life? It's like I've learned how to do it with food. All right, now how do I do this with business? How do I do this with marriage? How do I do this with my kids? It's like, how do we take this one approach and apply it to all of these different areas of our life, to where we actually enjoy the journey, not like, let me hurry up and die. It's like, I'm not trying to hurry up and get to the end of my life. It's like, how do I really enjoy this life that we've been given? So that's my encouragement to everyone listening, is to really look at the process that they're using, because the only way you will ever be consistent long-term, and even short-term, consistency comes from having a realistic, doable plan that you actually enjoy, where you're eating foods that you enjoy and there is no restriction.
Yeah. You actually hit on a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about in quite a while, but it's the getting away from our own negativity in our mind. And I used to classify myself as an extrovert because I always wanted to be around people and I never wanted to be alone. And as I got into the personal development space, and one of the things that we did the first time I went to the coach training that I attended was to address the negative head talk. And so that was the first time I went. The second time I went, I noticed that I was in this room full of 30 people for 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, I wanted to be by myself. And that was probably the first time in my life where I was like, I want to be by myself. And I wanted to be around other people because I didn't like that negative environment that I was creating for myself. It was crazy.
Right.
And there's like, I mean, I'm not joking when people were concerned about me when COVID started, because they hadn't realized how much I'd evolved. And my sister reached out to me, and she was the one that coined the phrase that I was Ariel. And I want to be where the people are. Like, that's who I was.
Yeah.
You know, but then it was like, I was so good. And now I almost feel like I've gone the other way, where I'm like, I don't ever want to leave my house, but I like being alone in my house.
Right. Pendulum has like swung the other way sometimes. Yeah.
And it's really interesting that we also, like, there's that saying, wherever you go, you're there. Right? Like, these relationships that have fallen apart, where you're like, well, he's this and he's that, and it's like, yeah, but the one common denominator is me.
Right. Yes. And really looking at, how do I take responsibility for this, and recognize that we're not trying to omit responsibility from anybody else. It's not that I am to blame, and we don't have to internalize everything, but really looking at from an awareness standpoint of, how did I contribute to this situation? How did I play a role? What was my role? And not just villainizing the other person.
Yeah. And there's one of my favorite concepts is, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility. So,
I like that.
Like, you may have had this relationship with food because every time you got a boo-boo, your mom shoved food in your mouth. Like, and so now you're severely overweight or moderately overweight, whatever the case may be. But like, now you're overweight and you're mad at your mom because you have this new awareness that your mom did that. And now we could be mad at mom, or we could accept the fact that it's not my fault that I've created this pattern, or that this pattern was created for me. It's my responsibility to change it now.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And then we're not holding on to this anger with our parents for creating this monster, because they didn't know either.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
Pretty new awarenesses for most of us.
Right. And I think the beautiful thing with that kind of perspective and that analogy that you gave was that we actually now know what problem to solve. So I think for so many of us, we're trying to solve a problem with just trying to find the right foods, trying to find the right exercises, trying to find, figure out what are these key missing pieces, these hidden secrets, when really it's like, oh no, we just need to start making sure that we're truly hungry before we put anything in our mouth. Like, now we can really solve for the right problem, which becomes way more easier. Or much more easier. That did not sound right grammatically, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, right. Yeah, most of these words are accurate. Mommy brain, right? I just should get used to it.
Like 10 months postpartum, like it hasn't come back yet. And I'm almost 10 years postpartum.
Yeah. So, but it's, it's important for us too to realize that it's not insurmountable. So yeah, even though we might have this habit or this notion of, oh, when I get hurt or in any kind of emotional, physical, mental pain, real or perceived, that my natural instinct is going to be to reach for food because that's how I've always solved it in the past, right? Like it's okay if we just recognize that and then say, hey, how do I want to solve this now going forward? What's going to be a way, like what's an approach? How can I start to change this and shift the pattern? Because now that we actually can see the pattern, it's like, oh, now I can rewrite it. But yeah, when we don't actually realize that's what we're doing, then it becomes much harder. Or we end up just looking for another diet, another set of rules, another list of workouts, another smoothie recipe, like all the bullshit that doesn't really matter.
Right. And I was doing a coaching call with a friend to help her practice, and she was going through this questionnaire that we were given, and the topic that I wanted to talk about was emotional eating. And she said and one of the questions was, if the problem of emotional eating was gone, would the problem be solved? And she didn't even, she stopped in the middle of a sentence and she says, like, well, duh. Right?
Yeah.
And my thought was, no, it wouldn't be solved, because the problem isn't the emotional eating. The problem is that I am afraid of my emotions.
Yeah.
And it was like so profound for me.
Yeah.
That was a huge awareness. And then taking that awareness and realizing that I also have habits built around that fear of emotion, and or that being uncomfortable with my own emotion.
Yeah.
And becoming aware of the patterns and then changing the patterns.
Yeah.
Like, this is why I get all geeked out on personal development, because it's like, it's so fascinating how things work.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And yeah, being comfortable with any emotion, with all emotions, with your emotions, because when we're not okay and comfortable with our own emotions, it's going to make it really hard to be comfortable around somebody else's. And that's when I think we can feel this disconnect between kids, between partners, between friends, these other areas as well. But that's such an important piece to recognize, that we just aren't really taught how to feel our emotions, how to recognize them, how to be okay with them, how to allow it and feel it. A lot of times we're told to, like, shush, or don't make a big scene. Big girls don't cry, boys don't cry. Like, there's a lot of taming down of emotions, and any kind of emotion shown, especially by women, I think, and especially in the workplace, it's she's hysterical, she's she's crazy, or it's like a very negative connotation around showing any kind of emotion, when that's how we're designed. Like, emotions are a good thing. We don't want to railroad over them, and so often that's what happens, whether it's with food, maybe with alcohol, it could be with scrolling social media, it could be with shopping. I mean, we can procrastinate and try to avoid our emotions in any kind of way, and some of us will do it kind of productively. We might clean, or like maybe you clear out your inbox, you do something that's, like, quote, productive, but what you're actually doing is trying to avoid or distract yourself from negative emotions that you're not willing to deal with, which ultimately is what we need to work on.
Right. And and that's why mom, gave you a cupcake every time you hurt yourself and you were crying. Like, it's like, because she's not comfortable.
Yes.
Your emotions.
Right. It's like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And I think too, we can all probably relate that as moms, we don't want our kids to be hurting.
Right.
My son, like, falls and, like, bumps his head or something, and I'm like, oh no, don't, like, I don't want him to feel any kind of pain. I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him in any kind of emotional distress. My husband, I feel like, has an okay time, like, letting him cry. Whereas, and sometimes I can do that too, especially when I know, like, he's just tired, he needs a nap, he'll calm down and fall asleep. Like, it's not a big deal. There are other times though where I'm like, oh no, like, I need to make him happy. I need to make sure he has a good life. He doesn't hate me, like, all the thoughts, all the things. And so it's like, well, yeah, no wonder mom was feeding me food, or trying to reward me somehow with food, because it was an easy way to try and make both of us feel better.
And what's really interesting to me with my 9.5-year-old is that when he's upset, I try to make him laugh. And he's
Yeah.
like, stop doing that. And I'm like, but I want you to feel better.
Right. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, it's like I learned so much from him. When I started my blog, it used to be like the life lessons that I learned mostly during the week, mostly through him.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time, I think I may have told you about this, but the first time was right after my friend passed away, and he was eating something and he goes, Mom, I eat when I'm sad. I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's like such good awareness, you know, and yeah, and kudos for you too, to be raising a child who is open about that, who is even like the thought process to be thinking that sort of thing, to bring that to awareness, you know, and just being open and in that space where he feels comfortable to share those things. You know, I think we've got to look at like, hey, this is a win.
Yes. Yeah, no, I appreciate it every time he like, and what's really hard for me too, and I'm sure every mom listening can understand this. Like when he's mad and I, want to comfort him, and I'll try to put my arm around him and he'll shrink away from me and like jerk away. And I'm like, it's loud to not want to be comforted. It's okay.
Yeah, right.
There's that internal rejection. My child just rejected me. And it's like, oh, okay, it's okay. It's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
the pan of brownies. It's okay.
Right. Yeah.
I don't even know where to go from that.
Well, I think a good thing to remember is that food solves hunger. Food does not solve emotional distress. Or, like we've just got to bring it back to food solves hunger. If I'm not truly hungry, then at least bring awareness to the fact that, hey, I'm choosing to eat and I'm not hungry. So I should probably look into this later, whether it's, in 10 minutes, whether you eat the food or not, make sure that you give yourself that time and space to actually reflect and look at that. And to get support, like find someone who can help walk you through this, find a coach, find a mentor, find a community where this is the norm, where this is common, where you can actually look at these sorts of things, because a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. We weren't raised in very emotionally available situations a lot of times, or with parents who really knew what they were doing, because guess what, none of us know what we're doing. We do the best that we can, like you said, and we get a lot of things wrong. So but find people who can help give you that direction and help you really work through these things, because that's ultimately what this is all about, is how do we create a better experience here on this earth for ourselves? How do we create a better experience for our kids? And being able to allow other people around you to experience and feel their emotions without it impacting your own, I think is such a huge skill that oftentimes just comes with practice. It's one of those things we just got to keep practicing.
Yes. Everything that you said. Yes, all of that. Advice to moms, but was there a specific piece of advice that you have to share?
So, gosh, yeah, there's a lot, right? Like there's so much.
And more.
Yeah, right. And I think so. One of the pieces is definitely about giving yourself compassion and allowing yourself to make mistakes, to get it wrong, and to try again. That in this world, like I think we get so hung up on failure and not being perfect, and it should look a certain way, and we compare. Often, what I find is we compare like our result, like instead of comparing our action steps with somebody else's action steps, we're trying to compare results versus like, oh, what are they doing? How are they doing things differently? What might I want to try in the future? So really just allowing that space, and being so careful and so mindful of the negative talk, the criticism, the guilt, the self-loathing, the shame, the judgment, just being so aware and onto yourself for that, and really getting back to a place of how can I assess? How can I figure out what happened, what worked, what didn't work? What do I want to do differently? Whether it comes to your child having a tantrum or a meltdown, whether it's something that happened with your spouse, whether it's with food, like really being able to assess without that shame or judgment, and really just get curious about how can I try this differently next time? Not just let me try harder, let me just, but like actually figuring out like, what do I want to do differently next time? How do I show up? Can I pause, do some deep breaths? What are some like legitimate action steps that are going to help you?
There's a totally different energy to, gosh, I'm so stupid for making that mistake. And
Mm-hmm.
wow, that was not something that I'm proud of. What can I do differently? Like it's a different energy, and you're actually asking yourself a question, and your mind cannot not answer the question of
Mm-hmm.
what can I do differently?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you ask the question, why am I so stupid? Your brain also can't not answer that question.
Right. Right. Exactly. Your brain's going to give you all the answers.
Yeah. And it has a
Yeah.
laundry list of why you're so stupid. And
Yeah.
and it's a different, but when you say, okay, well, that didn't go the way that I wanted it to. What could I do differently tomorrow? Like, or the next time that this happens? Like, okay, well, I just ate a whole package of Oreos. Awesome. How can I avoid that in the future? Right.
Right. Yeah. And so one of the pieces is always going to be to looking at like, what was I feeling? What was I feeling in the moment that kept me eating? What was I telling myself in the moment that had me first reaching for Oreos and then that had me continuing to eat them? And really just allowing your brain to uncover everything. This is why I believe so much in journaling and the power of it, really just getting it all out on paper. We see all of those kind of hidden subtle things like hiding in the background and just lurking, because I guarantee it's like, it starts off as like, one won't hurt. This will make me feel better. And then it kind of turns into, well, who cares now? Like, this tastes good. I want more. And then it's like, there's only 5 left. I might as well just eat them, and just being aware and conscious, and an understanding of like, oh, I'm starting to see where this is happening or why this is happening, and starting to catch things earlier, recognizing, hey, this is a cycle. I'm noticing this pattern is that when I have these thoughts, when I'm feeling these feelings, then I often am reaching for food, or then I'm overeating. Yeah.
Definitely. Is there a book that was exceptionally helpful in your personal development journey?
Oh, that's such a great question. I'm
Yeah,
like
just
looking
throw
over
that
at
at
my
you, I didn't
bookshelf.
tell you.
So yeah, I know, right? Like just one.
Right.
I love Brene Brown, and I
Mm,
think her Daring Greatly is something that really resonated with me. And her talking about shame has, like, it was just, I'd never heard anybody else talk about shame, and it was just so profound, and especially the difference between shame and guilt. And it was one of those things where I just felt so awakened and inspired, and also feeling like like I could do this, like we keep moving forward. That is probably one of the, yeah, one of my favorite books that I've gone through and read a few times. And I'll take a different color pen each time, and I'll, sometimes underline the same things, sometimes underline different stuff. But I would say that one for me was a really, really great one. Yeah.
yeah. I have my first introduction to Brene Brown was a book called Rising Strong.
Yeah.
And my parents gave it to me, and the headspace that I was in when they gave it to me, it was like, what are you trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
And so now that you bring that up, I'm like, I wonder how it would land the second time of listening to
Yeah.
it or reading it. I don't
Yeah.
remember if it was on Audible or not. Um, actually, I think that they bought the book and I returned the book and bought it on Audible because I was able to get 2 credits on Audible for the price of the one book.
Yeah.
Yeah, or something. Anyway, and I do remember being triggered by it a little bit at the first
Uh-huh.
paragraph, and really like forcing myself to listen to it. So I'm interested now to go back
Yeah.
and listen to it.
That's really interesting. There are some books that I have felt a little triggered by, and after, especially with listening, there was an audiobook by Grant Cardone that I think I ended up returning because I was like, oh yeah, this does not jive with me at all. I'm not digging this. But yeah, I'm kind of curious now. Oh, it's been a few years. I wonder how things might land now. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
I have a friend that I mean, I talk about no drama discipline, which
Hmm.
you have a 10-month-old, so you're not there yet, but read it before you get there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I recommend it to everybody. I think it's a great book because of it's a great book. And I was recommended it to my friend, and she stopped reading it in the first couple of maybe chapter or two
Uh-huh.
because she didn't like what he was saying about spanking and what he was saying about timeout.
Uh-huh.
And I think she was raised with both of those,
Uh-huh.
and she was using them both. And then she and I were having the conversation that she's like, oh my gosh, I'm loving this book now because
Uh-huh.
her mind had changed about spanking.
Uh-huh.
And I was also triggered when I first read it
Mm-hmm.
because I was doing the timeout thing,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that spanking wasn't working for him
Mm-hmm.
and that I didn't want to. He
Mm-hmm.
has a very high tolerance of pain. And I'm like, I don't like the time that I
Mm-hmm.
wrote about this in my book, like the time that I stopped spanking was because my hand started hurting and he hadn't even reacted to the
Mhm,
spanking itself.
mhm,
And I realized I was spanking
mhm,
because I was angry and
mhm,
not because
mhm,
trying to teach him something.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so both of those things, and so made me switch to timeouts. And he, in the first chapter, he says how timeouts are not, don't,
maybe
are
aren't as effective or
not effective because the kid
mhm,
sits there and thinks of how mean mom is for putting me in timeout,
mhm,
not about thinking about what they did wrong.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating, I think, to really look at some of the different techniques. And I know my guy's little, but I've already like invested in parenting books, parenting courses. Like I want to be prepared because I grew up in a home where there was spanking and it was not done out of love. It was not done with a conversation. It was done out of anger. And it was like a not a good situation emotionally, environment. Like I don't think it's not something that I want to repeat, to where I'm thinking I don't want to spank my child. And I also we also have a pastor who thinks that it's fine to spank children, or that says that the Bible is okay with that. And so I think it's really just figuring out what you like. Where's your line? Where do you feel convicted about doing or not doing? And it was interesting because he was like, we spanked all 4 of our children, and the youngest one, she got a spanking, almost every day. And I'm thinking, then your spanking wasn't working. It was not effective if she's still acting out, or you're spanking for not the right reasons. Like I don't understand. I don't quite know. And I don't know the whole situation. Right? Like he's older. His kids are all now my age, right? So it's like this was back, years and years ago, but really like not looking up to any authority figure either as being the one right be all, end all be all, like really listening, and as a mom deciding like this is what's working or this is not working, and being okay like looking for other resources because they are available.
Mhm.
Whether you have a child on the spectrum, whether you have a strong-willed child, whether you have any kind of behavioral issues, like there are resources out there. Like I said before, get support where you need it.
Mhm.
Don't feel afraid, don't feel ashamed. And I think it just shows the strength and the amazingness that of your motherhood that you can go and ask for support and say, hey, I feel like I'm struggling here and I want some extra ideas, another perspective. I need some help here. Yeah.
One of the things that I value the most in another person is understanding I have a problem and then going and seeking a solution to the problem. And that's, it's so important to me because I lived so much of my life not doing that. And how dramatically my life has changed since I started doing that. I feel like the topic of discipline, like we could do a whole episode on this topic. So I asked you those two questions. Where can people find you?
So you can find me online at bodyyoucrave.com. I'm also the host of the Body You Crave podcast, and I have a book on Amazon. It is a 60-day food and self-love journal. So I really want to tie together this idea of we can be losing weight and learning how to love ourselves and love our bodies right now and all throughout this process. And so it's not just about, can I track my food or track the calories or track this, but really like, how do I track my thoughts? How do I want to think about myself more intentionally? And that's also called Body You Crave. You can find it on Amazon. But that's the best place to find me. And then, the website will direct you to all of those. So bodyyoucrave.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to have to go do that because that's the one thing that I'm not seeing with Noom specifically, like, is the loving yourself connection. Because for me, the weight loss journey is just because there's a lot of me that wants to just have more energy. And, because I have a lot of passion for what I'm doing, and I want to be the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah.
And, and I want to be like, I don't want to get on the trampoline and be out of breath after 30 seconds because this is the only exercise I've done this decade. Like, I don't. Right. But so the weight loss aspect of it, I like I call it, it's like the psychology part of it, but it's like a Jedi mind trick. Little lessons, and then I make better decisions during the day. It's like a Jedi mind trick. I don't know. But the loving yourself aspect of it, that's on my mind because I have clients that are struggling with that aspect where they'll be like, well, I'm doing all the self-care things. Right. But why? Are you doing all the self-care things because you want to take care of yourself? Or because it's what you're supposed to do?
Right. Like, are you getting this massage and then thinking about the to-dos and how you screwed up and you really better not forget this on your way home, or feeling guilty or absolutely. Yeah. So I'll definitely, and I'm into journaling. I think I told somebody. Yay! I think I told somebody on a podcast episode that I was like, I hate journaling so much. But I had this nagging voice in my head. No, pay attention to me. And the me that the voice was talking about was me. Yeah. Pay attention to the inner me. Yeah. Because the inner me has information for you that you're not paying attention to. Right. Yeah. Right. Awesome. Yeah. And it doesn't have to take long. You don't have to spend your entire day. I mean, I could journal and write for all day long. You don't have to do that though, right? You can just spend 10 minutes, 5 minutes in the morning. But I feel like getting pen to paper, actually getting it out of your head is what's essential. Don't just let those words and those thoughts keep swirling because you will stew on stuff all day long. You will bring yourself down. Get it out. And even if it's just around one specific topic, it's one quick thing. Just give yourself that space to be honest with yourself. Stop trying to sugarcoat it. Stop trying to just feel happy or just feel content. Nope, just get it all out there. And then you'll have such a better starting point from there on to where do you want to go? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you for being on the podcast and pouring into our guests and into me. And I love these conversations. Yes, Thank you so much for having me. This was so wonderful.
Absolutely. So we will have another episode of Imperfect Momming next week. And until then, keep healing. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AliciaLyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. See you next time.